Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. I thought it'd be fun if we could get together and talk about our favorite Christmases that are game related. Luckily for me, all my favorite Christmases are game related, and so yeah, it kind of works out. So the very first one I have for you guys, I don't remember because I was still in my mom's womb at the time. I'm talking about Christmas 1980. My parents went to a Secret Santa, and my mom had got my dad a graphic equalizer for his car, and it was like a $50 Kmart one, right? It was nothing fancy. This other gentleman actually got the Mattel Intellivision for Christmas, but he had no interest in it, and so he offered to trade my parents straight across the Intellivision for the graphic equalizer. And so they made the trade and became obsessed with Intellivision and collected at least 60 games for it over the years. And then I first played that Intellivision when I was 4 years old, and I had that Intellivision for a long time. It was my first console. If you're wondering what game that is, like which game I played first, that's a story for a different time. Anyhow, because of that led my parents to believe that eventually I should have my own video game console for Christmas. And I remember the year really well. It was 1987, and I seriously didn't want anything other than an NES. Like, I had to have a Nintendo. All my friends were talking about it. It was like all my neighborhood friends like already were starting to have Nintendos, and I was pretty jealous. I really wanted one. I remember I made a Christmas list that just said Nintendo, Nintendo, Nintendo. And my mom was like, okay, well, is there anything else that you want? Like, anything at all? And I was like, nope, just the Nintendo. Well, you got to think of some other things. So I came up with some other things, like a boom box, stuff like that. And so Christmas comes around, and I remember unwrapping all kinds of really good presents, like all kinds of cool stuff. A boom box, remote control car, G.I. Joes, Transformers, all kinds of really cool stuff. And I remember telling my mom, you know what, it's okay that you didn't get me a Nintendo because I really like all this stuff. Well, my mom goes into her room and she comes out holding a Sears bag, and she just kind of plops it in front of me. And I'm like, what's this? And so I open up the Sears bag, and there it is, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And I was so happy. Like, it was like the greatest Christmas ever. And for many years, that was my favorite Christmas. Like, it was just awesome. It was so over the top, and I was so happy. And then I remember months later, I wanted Nintendo games for my birthday, and so my mom got me Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mario 2, and Mario 2 had just come out, and so it was $80 from Sears. No kidding, $80. And that's what encouraged my mom to not buy games for me anymore unless they were cheap. She set a $30 limit. She said, from here on out, if I'm buying you a game, it's $30 or less, which that's why, like, when I look back at the Nintendo, at the NES, I always think about these games that, like, a lot of other people don't really care for, because I stuck to budget titles, like games like Cabal, Jackal, Blaster Master even. Like, those were all budget titles, and so those were the games that I played for my NES. Until a few Christmases later, well, it would have been a couple Christmases later or so, I got the Sega Genesis for Christmas. And they had a deal that if you bought the Sega Genesis, you got Sonic 1 with it, but you could send away and get another game. And so I ended up getting Sonic 2, and I remember like getting that Sega and just being so over the top happy at once again feeling that same Christmas joy unwrapping that Sega Genesis, and it was just so advanced at the time, and I absolutely loved it. It did take several months for me to get Sonic 2, and I ended up calling Sega. It was like 1-800 call Sega or something like that, or Sega Now, I forget. But they were really nice. The lady that I spoke with said that a lot of people, have been waiting for their game for some time because I had such a high demand. Like, so many people wanted a free game and so many people bought a Genesis that it was a little overwhelming for Sega. But I definitely got the wheels in motion with that phone call, and within like 4 days, like, I ended up getting it in the mail, and so that was really cool. And on top of that, they sent me a letter apologizing for taking so long, and the lady that I spoke to wrote the letter, and I thought that was really cool. You don't get good customer service like that much anymore. So the next big Christmas for me was the Sega Saturn. And I remember the Sega Saturn costing a lot of money at the time. And Sony just limped in and got their PS1 out. And I already had it in my mind that I really wanted the Sega Saturn, because Sega had done me right in the past, and I kind of wanted to just stick with the Sega. And at the time, I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but Sony was kind of a joke at the time. I remember in the 80s, Sony was notorious for cheapo stereos. Like, there's stereos that you would buy and they would break down like within a year. Like, they had a lot of mediocre products out back then. And so, other than like the Walkman, which was like revolutionary. But yeah, I didn't think that buying or getting a console made by Sony was really a good idea. And my loyalty was with Sega. And so even though the Sega cost more, my parents still got it for me. And I remember it cost so much that my dad actually gave up his chunk of Christmas money so we could get this thing together. And we used to play the Sega Saturn all the time. Like, oh man. And it was my first CD player. And so that was really exciting for me, because up until then, I didn't have any CDs or anything, and no CD player, nothing. And so it played CDs, and then I was able to obtain CDs and listen to that, and it was great, right? And so after that, though, there were no more awesome game console Christmases for me for a long time. And it was finally last year that I got that itch. And, I started thinking to myself, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could get another console for Christmas? Because that hasn't happened in such a long time. And so I was doing everything that I could to get myself a PS4. And all the new ones that were like the cheaper bundles were already sold out. And so I was out of luck there. And a lot of stores, including Walmart, started closing on Christmas. Whereas before, Walmart used to stay open during Christmas. And so even if I wanted to go buy one on Christmas, I couldn't. Or even if they would have had them in stock, it wouldn't have mattered because they were closed. And so I started checking Craigslist and the marketplace and just doing everything I could to buy a PS4 on Christmas Day. And it did not work out. And luckily for me, my friend Brian saw the struggle. And what he did is he obtained one whichever way. I think he used other games to trade into a game store. That's my theory anyhow. I don't really know for sure. Either way, he got this thing and he sent it out to me, and he worked me a really good deal where I paid half right away, and then I paid the other half when I got it, which helped me out because and then I could focus more of my money on other people's gifts, right? But yeah, I still have the PS4. It still plays great. Cross my fingers that it lasts, another 2-3 years or so at least. And it's great. And I'm glad that I got to experience that joy once again. Anyhow, what kind of Christmas video game related stories do you have? Maybe you could leave them in the comments section, or even leave a reply video if you'd like. This year, it's a lot different for me. I'm kind of broke this year, and so I got very little for people, and I'm not expecting anything back. I don't expect to get a game console or anything like that. If anything, I think some socks, a new belt, maybe some new underwear would be great. Maybe I'm starting to show my age. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe in maybe give it another few years or so, and maybe I'll get a PS5 for Christmas or something. That would be cool. But until next time, guys, Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a happy New Year or a happy holidays, whatever. Later.